Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to Lunch and Learns. We took a brief break, but we are back. On behalf of the Primary Stages and ESPA family, I welcome you, all new and older folks who've been with us before. Thank you for returning, and thank you for joining us maybe for the first time for our Lunch and Learn playwriting prompts. For those of you who are new to us, Primary Stages is an off-Broadway theater company in New York City, and ESPA, the Einhorn School of Performing Arts, is the school within Primary Stages for established and emerging artists, directors, playwrights, actors, theater makers in general. We're your school. My name is Kelly Letourneau. I am a New York City-based theater maker and a team member at Primary Stages. My title is ESPA Student Services Associate. My email address is kelly@primarystages.org. That's Kelly. Well, I am so excited to have Caroline Aaron with us today. Caroline is an actress known to the theater, film, and television audiences, as well as a producer and published author and playwright. Caroline made her Broadway debut in Robert Altman's Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, and later appeared in the film. The following Broadway season, she starred in the revival of The Iceman Cometh. She next starred in Mike Nichols's Broadway smash comedy Social Security. Mr. Nichols first directed her on the film Heartburn, and she reteamed with Mr. Nichols for Working Girl, Primary Colors, and What Planet Are You From? She returned to Broadway starring in I Hate Hamlet. She headlined the West Coast premiere of Wendy Wasserstein's The Sisters Rosenwig, and she was acknowledged with both a Helen Hayes Award and Dramalogue Award. The list goes on and on. Caroline starting Beyond the Sea. She also appeared in over 100 films, including Sleepless in Seattle, Crimes and Misdemeanors, Alice, Bullets Over Broadway, Husbands and Wives, Deconstructing Harry, 21 and 22 Jump Street, Edward Scissorhands, Anywhere But Here, The Big Night, and Bounce, among others. You may know Caroline from also The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Secret and Lies, The Millers, Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, all the CSIs, all the Law and Orders, Two Broke Girls, Sex and the City, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Transparent, and the list goes on. It's a very long and amazing list. Caroline also writes. She writes essays. She's written essays on parroting, having been published, as well as her first play, Such a Pretty Face. Thank you for joining us today, Caroline.
I'm so glad to be here with all of you. Thank everybody for coming.
Yeah.
Kelly and I were talking before, and I think for us, I know you guys probably have a lot of questions of me as I do of you, but I think we're going to just jump in to begin with because it's so hard to do acting over Zoom, and that's what I wanted to work with you guys on today. So can you just raise your hands? How many of you are actors? Any of you? Oh, a lot of you. Okay, great. I'm sure we're all sort of like, I'm sure everybody is a lot of things. We are all sort of multifaceted. But from the acting point of view, what can we do right now when we can't be together to improve ourselves within that art? And so I went back to who my teachers were. And one of my great teachers was Stella Adler. And one of the most inspiring classes that she taught was on script interpretation. And I think that in all the work that I've done, people really are not very adept at this and they don't spend time on it. So I thought I would pass on to you a little bit of what I learned. And once I learned it, it's how I always work, whether I'm working on a sitcom or one of the great plays. It makes no difference because the play's the thing. It starts with the words. So it's a question of how do we find out what's inside of those words? I think that you can't really teach someone something that is not already inside of them. You just have to remind them that it's there. So I want to remind you all as we go through this of the humanity that is inside each one of us and what you're going to bring to each script that you actually work on. So I chose, just as a beginning for us to look at, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Is there anybody who is not familiar with this play, who's never heard of it, doesn't know anything about it? I thought it might be one we would all know. So what's going to happen is Kelly's going to put it up on the screen for us. And I just want to start with the beginning and ask you guys some questions. Let me just start by saying this. When I first get a job, the very first thing that I do, or I'm sure you do, is you read the script, right? And this is what I would advise you to do. Read it for impressions. Don't read it for how many lines do I have? What does my character do? Do I have to take off my clothes, or will I get a nomination? Try and leave all of that outside the door and just read it for impressions. What is this story? Where does it take place? Who's in it? What are your first instinctual impressions of this story? So that's what we're going to do. I mean, I wish we had time to do all of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because it's pretty spectacular, but Kelly's going to put it up, and we're going to start with the title. Let's just start back with the title. If you can go back a page, Kel, right here, go up a little. Well, no, let's start with this first page. Yeah, it right here where it says fun and games. Let's go back to where Albie lists Act 1, fun and games. Okay, what does that mean? Act 2, Act 3. So he has given a name to each act. First of all, let's think about how many plays do that. Not many. Not many. So there's a reason that Albie wants to name these acts, and that becomes your first breadcrumb. What is Edward Albee trying to give us by naming these acts? He's calling it fun and games. The next act is a dark night, and the next act is an exorcism. So even before I've cracked open the play, I'm sort of looking at a progression, and it starts out with fun and games. So that's what our first act is going to be. You'll scroll up to the players. He doesn't call them the characters, right? He calls them the players. Why would that be? Anybody have any idea? Anybody want to jump into that? I have to say. Keep in mind, the first act is called Fun and Games, and the characters are listed as the players. So what do you think that might tell us?
Perhaps make them feel more empowered. To give them a deeper sense of agency within the play itself.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, now remember, you guys, there's no right or wrong in this. So Shanna, is it Shauna or Shayna?
Shanna, like Hannah.
Okay, Shanna. Okay, so one of the things I want to say to you guys is, why do we go to see the same plays over and over again? Like, I want to see Shanna's Blanche versus Kelly's Blanche versus somebody else's Blanche. There's no objective Blanche Dubois in the universe. So the best work is personal work. And what it's going to be is a combination of what you bring from the outside to the text and the text itself. It is that alchemy between those two things that give us these spectacular performances. So Shanna has already said for her, players and fun and games is empowering these characters for her to begin with. Now let's look at these characters. The first one is Martha, a large woman. She's 52. Then we have George, her husband. He's 46. We have Honey, who's 26. And we have Nick, who's 30. So you guys can read those descriptions. I want to know, okay, what do you get so far? What does anybody see right away in terms of these people? What do you know so far about these people? Go ahead.
They're from different generations.
Yes, great. They're from different generations. A very good thing to notice. All right. Now, we know Martha and George are married. What else do we know just from looking at Martha and George? What's the first thing that jumps out at you about these two characters?
He's younger.
He's younger. What could that mean? Okay, if you're playing Martha or if you're playing George, there's a lot to take away from that right away. If it was you, so now we get to, if it was me, would I be self-conscious about having a younger husband, or would I be prideful? You know, there's something that could be like, you know, I'm so hot that young men like me, or it could be that I have a mother complex, or it could be that he's dependent on me and I like that power. There's all kinds of opportunities just from looking at this. And this is the beginning of how you start to work on a part. Okay, so now we have the setting, the living room of a home on the campus of a small New England college. What's the difference between a college and a university? What does that tell us about where we're going to be?
Yes, I think probably size. We're talking about a, sort of a small town versus a big university, I guess.
Right. And what's the difference? So this is our environment. This is our setting. This is where the play, the experience is going to take place. So we know that it's small, New England versus the South versus the Midwest versus the West Coast. What do we know about small colleges in New England? And if you don't know anything about them, then your job is to look that up. Because even though that's not directly stated in the play, what impact that has, the fact that this is in a small college town in New England is definitely a character in this play. Definitely. So your next job is to go ahead and do some research. Maybe you don't know any small colleges. Maybe you do. Maybe you went to one. What's the difference between going to NYU, as an example, in the middle of Manhattan, and the difference between going to a school like Bowdoin or Middlebury or Vermont or Maine? What is the culture? How is that affected by the size of the place, right? Even the weather. A small New England college is going to be under snow a lot. And that's one of the things that makes this play able to take place, is the smallness of this environment. It probably couldn't take place at UCLA or USC. Even if these same 4 characters were teaching at a different school, I don't think this could happen. The things in this play could happen. So now, one of the things I want to tell you that was very much a part of what Stella believed was important for the actor, and I feel it's very much missing from training today, is there's a reason that we don't just hand out scripts to the audience and let them read it and then go home, right? It takes flesh and blood to make it come alive. The opening words of Death of a Salesman are, "Oh, oh." Stella spent maybe 12 hours on that in her class with us. What does that tell us? Oh, oh. On the page, it means nothing, but in the hands of the right actor, it can be magnificent, absolutely magnificent, right? And achieving the size of a play's theme, that's what I sort of believe that script analysis can give you. There is what's literal, which is on the page, which is my being in a play and saying, "I'm making you dinner. Is anybody allergic to cheese?" Let's just say that's my line in this particular play, right? Well, I think, Stanislavski said, there's a difference between interesting and uninteresting truth. I'm assuming that that everybody's baseline of talent, it's like a baseline mammogram. Your baseline of talent is you'll tell the truth. Now, how are we going to make that truth interesting? Really interesting. And I think it's by really digging deep down into a play. Stella Adler said, "Facts are death to the actor until they are fed through imagination and become experience." That is one of the most important things that I think I ever learned. What takes a play from being 2-dimensional into being 3-dimensional is you, absolutely you. She also believes that as an actor, you have to work on your body, you have to work on your face, but the most important thing you have to work on as an actor is your mind. It really is. And people always think actors are dumb. I think it's the opposite. I think the great actors, are incredibly smart. And so part of the script analysis that I want to go through today has to do with this. I'm going to read you a little something that Stella said. "Facts are meant to get you thinking, like switching on a light in a darkened room. It is the process where you discover what you have to work with. The room is filled with possibilities. All of these possibilities are there to feed into your understanding of the play." So the facts, that's like, I'm playing Martha, I am married to a professor, my father works at the school. These are all the facts that I am given, right? And That's my beginning understanding of the play. All right. So the process of getting from the facts to the experience. How can I experience Martha as well as just understand the facts of Martha? That's what your technique is about. And so today, this is going to be very superficial what we're doing, but that's what I want to just sort of introduce you to this technique. So to begin with, this is what I do. I look at it. I'll highlight. I'm Martha, as an example. Okay, I look younger. It says I'm ample but not fleshy. Right? These are all adjectives. These are all the facts. How do I? At some point, those facts I want to pass through me and become the experience of living as Martha. All right. So now we're going to go to the first scene. All right. And act one, fun and games. All right. That gives me an idea, I think, of the tone of what's coming next. Set in darkness, there's a crash against the front door. Martha's laugh is heard. The front door opens, lights are switched on. Martha enters, followed by George. Okay, so now, a crash. Why is there a crash? I have to say to myself, why is there a crash? The very first thing I do is I read it, and then I divide the scene into beats. Now, again, there's no right and wrong, but to me, a beat is when my action is going to change. So let's look over this scene for a second. I'll just read both parts out loud, and then I'll tell you where I think the first beat ends and what we do with that. And then I'm going to have you guys break the rest of the scene down into beats. So Martha, Jesus, George, H, Christ. For God's sakes, Martha, it's 2 o'clock in the, okay, now I'm going to write down it's what time it is, right? As I'm working, I go, oh, okay. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, George. Well, I'm sorry, but what a cluck you are. It's late, you know, late. She looks about the room. She imitates Betty Davis. What a dump. Hey, what's that from? What a dump. Okay, scroll up a little more. How would I know? Oh, come on. What's it from? You know, Martha. What's it from, for Christ's sake? What's what from? I just told you, I just did it. What a dump. What's that from? Okay, another thing just popped out for me as I was looking at it. George says, what's that from? And I've just asked him a question, like literally 10 seconds ago. He's not listening to me. Okay? Is that something that is part of our dance always, or is that just at this moment? I don't know. I don't really know. Is it an exception to the way we relate, or is it the way we relate? These are questions I write down for myself, which will have everything to do with what kind of choices I'm going to make. I just told you, I just did it. What a dump. What is that from? I haven't the faintest idea. What? Dumbbell, it's from some goddamn Betty Davis picture, some goddamn Warner Brothers epic. I can't remember all the pictures that nobody's asking you to remember every single goddamn Warner Brothers epic, just one single little epic. Betty Davis gets peritonitis in the end. She's got this big black fright wig she wears through the picture, and she gets peritonitis, and she's married to Joseph Cotton or something. Somebody. Okay, we're not at the end of the first beat yet, but I want to hear from you guys. What happened just there? So Martha's describing this movie, and the only thing George says is somebody. Somebody tell me what you think's going on and what we can learn from it. Kelly's gonna.
Carol.
Yeah.
He corrected her. And we can tell that I don't know if we know by now that he's a professor, but he's somebody who cares about speech and how things sound.
So he cares about speech and how things sound. And what Martha cares about in this moment is trying to remember the name of the movie, okay? So, like, this is a choice that you have to make. Let's just look at this next word, somebody. Okay, so there's a lot of choices you can make there, you guys, as actors. Your action could be to, spit it back out at him, somebody. It could also be, okay, swatting it away like a fly. Okay, somebody. I don't give a shit, right? So you're going to make a choice there about how you are going to repeat the word somebody. And it's going to have in it some of your life, your blood, your heart. How are you going to make that choice as an actor? Do not be general. Do not be general. If this is something that George does all the time, you might swat it away like a fly. Fine. You know, somebody, whatever. I don't give a shit. Because you want to get back to what you were talking about. It may be that if he corrects your English one more time, you are going to go into the kitchen and you're going to take out a knife and you're going to stab him. Okay? So that is one word, can be delivered up so many different ways, depending on, I know for you actors, you've heard this, depending on what your intention is. Now we know he corrects her English, somebody. And she wants to go to Chicago all the time because she's in love with that actor with the scar, but she gets sick and she sits down in front of her dressing room table. What actor, what scar? Okay. I can't remember his name, for God's sakes. What's the name of the picture? Now we've got George in the game a little bit. He wants to know the actor, and he wants to know what his scar was all about, but that's not what Martha wants to know. She sits down in front of her dressing table, and she's got this peritonitis, and she tries to put her lipstick on, but she can't, and she gets it all over her face, but she decides to go to Chicago She decides to go to Chicago anyway, and what happens? Chicago, it's called Chicago. Okay, George, this is the second time George has corrected her in this one beat. What is the picture? It's called Chicago. Okay, now it can look like George is correcting her. Chicago, it's called Chicago. Good grief, don't you know anything? Chicago was a little musical starring Little Miss Alice Faye. Don't you know anything? Well, that was probably before my time. Okay, we are getting more of the dance of this couple. And Martha says, can it? Just cut that out. Okay. What is the action behind those two lines? Can it just cut that out? Anybody? What would be the action? What is Martha doing? You've heard that expression. Now, what are you saying? What are you doing?
I think, well, especially when he says that was probably before my time. Now we might have something about him being younger. And she's like, just no, we're not doing that right now.
We're not doing that right now. And look at the way the sentence is written, just cut that out with an exclamation point, right? There's so many ways you could do that. You could be very charming. It could be, don't do that, right? But the way Albee has written it, it seems to me that what's inside there is a warning. So if you know that you're playing that as an action and you're going to say that line as a warning, it's like, cut that out or else, right? That's a very different way than to, as I swat away the fly. Why do I think it's different this time? Again, no right or wrong, because he has an exclamation point after the word out, and he doesn't earlier have an exclamation point after the word somebody when she corrects him, when he corrects her, okay? So it leads me to believe the temperature is hotter right there. And that's all from just looking at the script. This picture, Betty Davis comes home from a hard day at the grocery store. She works in a grocery store. She's a housewife. She buys things. And she comes home with the groceries and she walks into the modest living room of the modest cottage modest Joseph Cotton has set her up in. Are they married? Now, what's George doing? Are they married? Let me ask you. You're playing George. Is he very interested? Does she have this fish at the end of her hook? Do you think, based on what you see in the script? So pretend you're George, man, woman, doesn't matter. So now George is asked a couple of questions. She works in a grocery store. Are they married? Does that mean that George is invested in this story now? What do you think?
I don't think so. I think that he's just placating her.
Placating is a great thing to play. That is a verb. It is an action verb. You think she's placating her? What's another possibility? What's another verb of something he might be doing to her? Anybody?
Testing her memory?
He could be testing her memory. Well, one thing we know he's literally doing is he's interrupting her. Let's just start with that. He is interrupting her, because if you see the way it's written, right? You see that? Dot, dot, dot. So that's one thing to pay attention to. Are they married? Yes, they're married to each other. Cluck. Now, it doesn't seem to me that Martha, just based on how she responded, doesn't seem like Martha is particularly pissed at that. She just, thinks he's an idiot, right? And she comes in and she looks around and she puts her groceries down and she says, "What a dump." And he says, after a pause, "Oh." And Martha says, "She's discontent." Okay, I want to hear you guys I want to hear what you guys think is happening in that moment. Is Martha still talking about that movie?
She's
No.
talking about her.
Themselves.
It seems like she's discontent, and that's her way of, saying that to him.
Absolutely. That's exactly what's happening. She's comparing herself, or hoping that George, in seeing that fictional character, will see the facts of Martha's existence as she sees it. She is discontent. And George has the word "oh" twice. But one time, there's a pause. So she finishes describing the movie, and it's like, okay, so what's the name? Oh. It could be, now you're playing Martha. Are you thinking or not? What are you doing the whole time? What are you playing as George the whole time Martha is giving you the rundown of this movie? What are you doing as George? "Oh," he says. And then she says, "She's discontent." And he says, "Oh," again. Now Martha takes a pause. Well, what's the name of the picture? I really don't know, Martha. Well, think. Now, I think that's the end of the first beat. So I'm going to mark that as the first beat. Now when I go to, now that's my whole action. I want you guys to think for a second. I want you to reread those 2 pages, that first beat. And I want you to come up with what you think the overall action of Martha is in that scene, in that beat, and what's the overall action of George. So take a minute, and then I want everybody to just chime in and tell me what you came up with. When I say what's their action, what are they doing? What is their objective in these few lines, all the way through the first beat? Well, think. Do it for both characters, you guys. Okay. Who wants to start? And no right or wrong. I'm just very interested in what you guys have to say.
Well, they've been at a party and they've been having a great time, and one of the things seems like she wants to keep it going. She wants to keep it lively. She wants to keep it fun. She wants to keep everything. And it seems that they've been drinking a lot. So it seems like she's carrying in where they were, and she's trying to continue it into their home. That's
So
what I
you
get in
say
the
that
first part.
Martha's action is to party.
Yeah, to party. Yes.
Okay. And what about George?
George doesn't seem to want to party anymore. George wants to, George wants to rest. George wants to.
That's great. Those are 2 easy. Those are 2 easy things to play. Who else? So Martha wants to party. George wants to rest. Those are things to play. Like, one of the things about being able to really analyze a script is, unfortunately and fortunately, you want to be able to not be completely dependent on your director. And sometimes it's dangerous to be dependent on your director. So you need to be able to figure out, what am I doing? What am I doing when I walk in the door? This is the opening of the play. So somebody else, tell me, what is Martha doing? What is George doing?
I
In
like
these first
Martha's trying to plant a seed about their own relationship. And I feel like the bottom of the first page, something happens because the stage direction says she looks about the room. And I just wonder, like, does she come in the door and then there's a moment where she sees the room and she decides to go for the dump story? Like, I just feel like something in there happens to make her go on that path.
Right, right. Okay, so what do you think it is?
Well, I think
Very
the
good.
path is to talk about their own relationship.
Right. And
It's a
what is
plant
the
seed that
line?
we're not okay.
What is the line that Martha uses from the movie? What a dump. And having read the whole play, what is Martha's overall impression of her home?
She's dissatisfied.
She's
Wants to-
disappointed.
wants to zing it to him that he didn't
She's
provide.
disappointed,
Disappointed.
right? She's disappointed. So when she looks around the room, and this also tells you something about the character, instead of her saying directly to George, I can't believe I live this way, she does it through a movie, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to tell, and we also know the name of this act is Fun and Games. Okay? So, but in order to have that roiling underneath, you're absolutely right. When she walks in the door and she looks around, now, this is the other thing for an actor. Where have they just come from?
Somewhere nicer.
Somewhere much nicer. Somewhere bigger, nicer, more expensive, more what she had in mind. So you, from the minute you walk in and you're playing this character, all of that is inside of you. And I'm sure we can all relate to that. You went to you went to a party to watch the Tony Awards at somebody's apartment, and you're still living in the studio, and as much as you like them, they're no more talented than you are, and why can't your husband get another job or whatever, right? And you walk in the door and you look around and she pulls this movie out of her ass, right? Now, the question is, what is George doing during all of this? Because Martha has most of the lines, but it doesn't mean George is not active, extremely active.
Avoiding?
Yes. I'd say that's an easy thing to play. He's avoiding, or he doesn't want to take the bait. Now,
Yeah, I would say like he
George,
wants to get her off his back.
yes, and playing George, you can decide when he goes from just trying not to engage because he doesn't want to turn the temperature up, he knows her really well, and when he decides to take her on. There, within this small beat, he also teases her. He says something about, well, I wouldn't know because I'm so much younger than you. He gives her the wrong name of the movie. Now, this is another choice you have to make as George. Does George really think the movie is Chicago?
No, I think he's absolutely playing with her.
Yes, I think so too. Fun and games. Now, that's how you would know that, based on these are breadcrumbs that the author has given you. So when you say Chicago and you're playing George, it could be like a light bulb. Chicago, it's called Chicago, right? The more invested George is in that being the right title, the more torment he can dole out to Martha. Think about it this way. If he went, is it Chicago? That's not anywhere near as upsetting as, I know what it is, it's Chicago. So she has to come back and say, no, it's not, you idiot, right? So this is all that I'm trying to get you guys to understand about script analysis. Anybody else write down what the actions are for George and Martha, because I want to hear more.
I feel like each of them isn't really willing to entertain the other's moment, if that makes any sense. And so
Yes.
that's why the scene is so interesting to watch, is because Martha, like Shauna initially stated, she wants to be in the moment of where they've just come from. And
Right.
she's still enjoying that. And George isn't allowing her to have that. Right. And so that's why I feel like their dialogue is subtly combative. Well, it's not subtle actually. It's pretty explicit in a lot of ways, but they're like talking at each other. I feel like I've seen my parents do this growing up. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, one person's, you know, just come from the grocery store and the other person is concerned about the leak in the basement. You know, they're talking at each other, not necessarily with each other.
I'm so glad you said I have seen, you know, dialogue like that between my parents, because that is the beginning of making work great. Another Stella Adler quote: "The process of getting from the facts of the play to the experience of the play is what the actor's technique is about. As with any lie, every time you go back to it, you see more clearly. You understand it better. There's more detail. You begin to believe it more, and you connect to it more thoroughly. The experience of the lie is in you." So what does she mean by that? Well, she's using the word lie for fiction. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is fiction. It's not the biography of your life if you're playing Martha, right? But when you said, I think I've heard my parents do this a lot, you are now converting the fiction into the experience. And that's what we all want to do. Stella says, the actor's connection to the part, that was the beginning of your connection, and the character's world is what brings a play to life. And the more gifted the actor, the more in-depth the choices are in making the fiction real. Facility is fine, but greatness must be paid for in blood, is a direct quote of Stella's.
Wow.
So you guys know actors who are thespians. I call that thespian acting. When someone's technique is, you know, above reproach, and I feel nothing. You know what I mean? I go, well, that was a thespian performance. You know what I mean? And they are going to get an A on their paper. When she means you pay for it in blood, it costs you to bring up witnessing your parents being in this state. That's going to cost you as a human being, and that's what you owe to the theater if you're going to be in it. So that's why we do this kind of work. So you now have to take that. Yes.
May I ask, so
Sure.
are you saying that personal experiences will help the actor more than anything else?
It is a combination of things. It's not, I think that, yes, making something personal might have to do with your own experience, but not necessarily. I was in class with Stella Adler, and there was a young woman doing a scene. I was like 21 or something. There was somebody in their early 20s doing a scene, and I can't remember what the scene was, but the character was in her 40s, and she was married. She had children. And the actress said after she did the scene, you know, I just couldn't relate to that, you know. I'm not married. I don't have kids. And Stella just screamed at her, you have 40,000 years of blood memory. Use that. And what she meant by that is your humanness is not confined to your experience. Your humanness is limitless, and you're going to find it from your experience, from paintings, from operas, from eavesdropping at Starbucks. There's all kinds of places that you're going to find that stuff. I think to start with your own experience is the best because it's so accessible to you. And then you're going to find out where the holes are. Like, let's say you never went to college and nobody in your family ever went to college, and you have no idea what an academic environment is like, which a lot of this play deals with, an academic environment, right? Well, now you have to do some homework and you have to do some research. And after you do research, you go, you know what? A college is very much like a restaurant. If that's the business your parents were in. So now you've pulled it back into a place that you can anchor it to in a personal way after you've done your research. It's like, if we're going to do Shakespeare, none of us have been kings and queens, and none of us probably ever will be. None of us have ever owned countries. But what is that about? How do we make that personal and real and emotional, as opposed to, you know, thespian-like? Is okay, being a queen, maybe the closest thing I have to that is being a teacher. That this hour that I have with you guys is my kingdom. And then I have to start to understand things about how do I behave in these circumstances? What is different about me when I'm in charge of you for an hour, or when I'm at a gym taking a spin class. There are two very different people there in terms of me, right? So it's that kind of thing that I want you guys to start to process. Now, you said that, I can't remember who was the person that said it reminded them of their parents, and if they're like two ships passing in the night, or they're talking about different things. You know, as an actor, you need to be able to make that active. You need to be able to say, what am I doing? I'm Martha, what am I doing? And the reason I want you to learn how to divide a scene into beats is because with each beat change is an action change. Think of it as a strategy change, in a sense, in this particular play. Martha comes in with a strategy. After the first beat, she's going to change that strategy. Same is true of George. Okay, does anybody else want to jump in about what is Martha doing, what is George doing in these first 2 pages? Okay, now, I'm going to tell you to look again at the end of the beat. She's discontent. So does Martha want a party? Is that what she's doing when she comes in? You see at the end of this beat, she says when she's talking about Betty Davis, she's discontent. And George says, oh, and she says, well, what's the name of the picture? So does she want a party? Maybe. But she wants to party is, let me just say, that's the first layer. I think an even deeper layer is she wants to torment George in the way she is tormented by her circumstances. I think we can all relate to that. When you are dissatisfied or discontent. So you need to add that into this beat so that you can arrive at that moment. She's discontent.
Does she want to punish him? Does she
Yes.
want to push him, punish him? Because she
Yes.
wants more for him and more for herself. And if he can do that, then it'll help
Yes.
her life.
Exactly right. Now, to come to that, which is a very easy thing to play. So when you come to that and you go to punish, that's what I'm playing. From the minute I walk in the door, I'm going to punish George, right? So being loud is a way to punish him, right? It's so late, and she comes in the door. There's a crash against the door. She looks around, and the very first thing she says is, what a dump. It may be that she's referring to the room. I'm sure if you've ever seen this production, lots of times actresses do an imitation of Betty Davis. What a dump, right? It doesn't have to be the choice. The choice can also be looking around at your own place and going, what a dump. And then go, what's that from, George? You get to make that choice as an actor. Do you want to imitate Betty Davis? If you have come up with the idea that you are going to punish George for not being more successful, and that you just came from a place, this is the house, where you were was the house you were supposed to live in, was the life you were supposed to have. That was supposed to be your life. Instead, you ended up with this life. That's what you come in the door with, right? So now if you have something to play, like you're going to punish George, that will inform everything, every choice that you make as you go along. I know this seems like, like really like getting down into the weeds and being really, really picky, but I'm telling you, if you take the time to evaluate every script beat by beat and look at your punctuation and look at your stage directions and try and like open up what's on the page, you're adding the third dimension to these 2 dimensions, and you don't have to stick with it. You can try, I mean, that's what rehearsal's for. That's the blessing of the theater. We get to rehearse. You come in and you try, oh, let's keep partying. If that's what you want to try as an action to begin with, you might, whether a director tells you that or not, you might walk in the room and try and put George into a dance move, right? Oh, what a dump, what's that from? You might try and dance with him, right? And he tries to get away from you. There are so many possibilities. But first you have to dig into the script. You can't make them random. Stella Adler used to say to us all the time, when she would ask an actor while they were doing, and they would go like, well, this morning I had cereal for breakfast, but it had really turned, and then I got a stomach ache. And she would stop them and go, don't fictionalize. If it's not on the page, it's not your business. Go back to the text. Always go back to the text. I like to think of the text, even if it's the stupidest, and believe me, I've done a lot of stupid television, even if it's the stupidest television show in the world, these are breadcrumbs. You're going to follow these breadcrumbs into taking the play from being two-dimensional into being three-dimensional. That's what these breadcrumbs are for. So now, if we say, I really don't know, Martha, well, think. Well, that, now the next thing that happens is if we say that's the end of that beat, and George says, and we start beat 2 with, I'm tired, dear. It's late, and besides. Okay, now a little bit of Martha being direct comes out. I don't know what you're so tired about. You haven't done anything all day. You didn't have any classes or anything. Well, I'm tired. If your father didn't set up these goddamn Saturday night orgies all the time. Okay, so now we have some clues in here. Her father, they were just at her father's house. All right, we all know, we all have parents, whether with us or not with us. There's probably nothing more loaded that could happen to anyone than coming from an event at your parents' house. Now you have to decide, how do your parents feel about George? How do you feel about your parents? How do they feel about you? But this all has to do with building where you're coming from. So, well, that's too bad about you, George. And he says, well, that's how it is anyway. You didn't do anything. You never do anything. You never mix. You just sit around and talk. Okay, now, that's a kind of a confusing line because I see the line, you never mix. You just sit around and talk. Well, I would think of mixing as talking. You know what I mean? It sounds like he is conversing with people. So what does Martha mean? What does she mean there? Anybody got an idea?
Doesn't fit in?
Great. He doesn't fit in. Wow, I didn't even think of that. He doesn't fit in. So she wants something of him in this situation. Now we know that he didn't deliver. He didn't deliver it.
Also, mixing as in doing good things for his career by talking to the right people.
Great. Great, great, great.
And that he talks but does not listen. He doesn't care.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He's not listening to his wife, and he probably didn't listen to anybody at that party.
Where do you find that in the text? This is what I mean about, you need to tell me where that is in the text, that George might not listen. It's perfectly valid. I just want to know where you found it.
Didn't do anything. You never do anything.
I think that the whole dialogue is just, he's not really listening to her. He's just,
right.
They're off in two different directions. He doesn't really care what she has to say.
Right.
That's the feeling I get anyway.
Yes, I think you're right. Go ahead. Who else?
There's an insinuation that he lacks social skills because she says mix as opposed to like he's in his head talking to people, and she's out sort of really connecting and being like you say, flesh and blood, and she's actually in the experience where he's all up here and he is sort of kind of a little more awkward.
Great. That's great.
More like maybe he's more introverted and she's more extroverted.
Yeah,
Great.
I hear what you're saying there. You don't know how to choose what's good for you.
Great.
We're at a party. She's like, we're at a party. For goodness sake, be at a party,
Right. Great. These are all so great. So once you start exploring a script this way, you will see that, with all homework, you sort of throw it away. But now you have a place to come from to make choices by looking at it this way, and not, when she says you never mix, you just talk. I love this idea that he is cerebral, that he's always cerebral. And who is he talking to? Maybe he's talking to the waiter that's passing drinks. And you know what I mean? Where he starts saying to him stuff like, where'd you get that shirt? And it would make Martha's head explode. There's plenty of people to talk to here that could be valuable, but that's not what George does. So your job as an actor is to build that party for yourself before you come in. And have you ever been to a party like that? Has your partner ever disappointed you in this way when you came from an evening, right? Why didn't you talk to that casting director? Why did you just keep talking to your dresser the whole night? You know, it was the cast party. Why didn't you talk to the cast? You just were talking to everybody else. And what did that make you feel? And how did you handle it?
Right.
So what do you want me to do? Do you want me to act like you? Do you want me to go around all night braying to everybody the way you do? I don't bray. All right, you don't bray. I do not bray. All right, I said you didn't bray. Okay, to me, that's the end of the second beat. So if this beat starts with, I'm tired, dear, it's late, and besides, I wonder what George was going to say. This is not Martha cutting him off because it's a ... This is George stopping talking. So you might not know that right now. You might have to rehearse for 3 weeks. Do you know what I mean? Before you know what that choice is. I'm tired, it's late. There could be a million choices. And besides, he could be thinking, it won't matter what I say. It won't make any difference what I want. You know, we don't know. But if you're playing George, you need to be thinking something. You can't, you just can't. It's like sometimes I see things and I think, oh, those actors are just sitting around having text. Nothing's happening. I can feel that nothing is happening. And besides, and then Martha says, I don't know what you're so tired about. You haven't done anything all day. You didn't have any classes or anything. Okay, so now it's a Saturday. Let's say the party's on a Saturday night. He says Saturday night orgies. Wow, what did Martha and George do all day before this party? Where were they when they even went to this party, right? Maybe as you build a character, I can see that if I was playing George, maybe I was reading. You know what I mean? Like, you have to know, like, I don't see George like working under the hood of a car, as an example, based on what I know about this play and this character. So George might be reading all day. What was Martha doing? You know, Martha is like a caged animal. You can feel it. She has so much going on inside and so few outlets for it. And he says, well, I'm tired. And now he says, it's your father's fault. I wouldn't be so tired if it weren't so late and I didn't have to do this every Saturday night, right? And she says, tough shit. And he says, well, you asked, and that's what's going on with me, right? Always, you guys, put it in your own language if you need to, in order to make it accessible, so that by the time you do it in front of an audience, it is your language. It's the exact way you would say it. Now, Martha goes back to it. So they have that little mini beat in, I don't know what you're tired about. Well, if I didn't have to stay up so late on Saturday night because of your father, well, tough shit. Well, that's how I feel. And Martha says, you didn't do anything. She's going back to it. She cycles back to the beginning. I don't know what you're so tired about. You didn't do anything, right? Now the stakes are a little bit higher. You didn't do anything. You never do anything. You never mix. You just sit around and talk. This is all the same thing as the line, she's discontent.
Yeah.
This is Martha's dissatisfaction with her life, with this place, with the last 2 hours, and George. It all is coming from this discontentedness. You have to keep that in mind as you move through these different beats, because, you know, it's really easy when you're playing either of these characters to start up here. Where are you going to give yourself to go, right? So you have to make your wants very specific, right? So what does Martha want from George right in this beat? So we know that she wanted, the literal thing she wanted in the first beat was to know the name of the movie, right? What does she want in this beat?
Wants to rile him up.
Mm-hmm.
I think she wants to get him to do something. Just like wake up, like come on.
Like,
wake up, do something, do something.
Lighting a
Because
fire.
also, oh yeah.
It's too late in their relationship, in their marriage, for her to expect him to be any different. So I think she just has to keep torturing him. That's
right.
I
Right.
think
Or go ahead.
wants, excuse me, him to recognize that this world of the party that he wants to completely disregard is somewhat real and substantial to her. And she wants him to at least reach for some of what she wants.
Yes. Now, based on what Shanna said, which is so great, now we're going even deeper with Martha. So now, you know, I also studied with the great Uta Hagen once, and I was doing a play for her. And one of the notes to one of the actors afterwards was this. He was like throwing chairs at me at a certain point and, you know, really tearing a passion to tatters. And Uta said to him afterwards, you know, anger is just the superficial expression of despair. And if you could get to the despair, you would be a great actor. Okay, so it's very easy in a play like this to play only the anger. Martha's angry. We know Martha's angry from the minute she walks in the door. She's angry. She's an angry housewife. But if you only play the anger and not the despair, then you're going to get tired of her really quickly, right? So there's all kinds of things to find in these beats. I think that's great what you guys said. It's easy to play. Wake up. Wake up. You could be tormenting him. You could be needling him. And when Shanna said you want to point him in, you can be playing, don't you see? Look at this. Look at what I want. See me. See me. Okay, and then we get to the most interesting thing, so unexpected. George finds a button. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to be you? Do you want me to go around all night braying at everybody the way you do? Okay, I don't bray. All right, you don't bray. I don't bray. All right, I said you don't bray. And these are Albies, braying softly and hurt. Albie wrote that. You know, sometimes you guys, when you get a play, those things will be a stage manager's notes about the production, but these are Albie's. Okay, so George pushed a button. Is it a button he knows? Maybe, maybe not. Is there anything, I mean, you can each think for yourselves, if you were playing Martha, what's the thing that somebody might say about you, even though it's a paper cut that would go deep? If somebody said to me, like George is saying to Martha, you're such a loudmouth, that would really hurt my feelings. And I am loud, and I have a big mouth. So, I mean, you could legitimately accuse me of it, but it would really be painful. Do you know what I mean? Because that's not what I don't think that what I'm doing is empty or inconsequential. Calling somebody a loudmouth means you're just running your mouth. You have nothing to say. And that would be so, so painful to me, right? There are other things people could say to me, which is you're a bad dancer and I wouldn't give a shit, right? So it may not hurt you in the moment if you're playing Martha. If George goes, what do you want me to do? Go around all day and bray at everybody the way you do? Maybe you don't care about that. But while you're rehearsing, you have to find that place inside yourself when somebody has said something fairly innocuous to you that really hurts. Really hurts. Everybody has that. Everybody has that thing. Please don't say that to me. That I don't have a sense of humor about. That's painful. George finds it. Choices that George has to make. Does he already know where that button is? Has this happened between them before? Maybe, maybe not. Again, there's no right or wrong. If he says this all the time, and every time he says it, if every single time he says it, she has this reaction, well, what fun is that? That's a lot of fun for George. He knows exactly what lever to pull. If he's never said it before to her or in this particular way, and she has that reaction, when he answers the line, when she goes, I don't bray, he could be, all right, you don't bray. Like, I had no idea would be such a big deal. I've called you a fat pig. I've called you a whore. You know what I mean? I've called you a lot of things. I didn't know that would be the thing that would, set you off. These are all the ways that you make choices, you guys, which is why a script has to be really looked at and broken down. And I know we've taken so much time on such a little amount of text, but it's probably all we really do have time for in this particular session. But I wanted to give you an idea of what I learned from Stella and how I work and how this is something you guys can do. I mean, even recreationally, just take a play or a part that you dream of playing. And while we're all fucking stuck, divide it into beats. Find out what's inside of it in a way for yourself. Because because of the practical aspects of the theater these days, we've cut rehearsals from 6 weeks to 3 weeks. When I first came to New York, you rehearsed every play for 6 weeks. And before that, it was 8 weeks. And now you don't rehearse movies or TV shows at all. So now we really do have to develop our muscles as a way to really become, for myself, I call it being a detective of the heart. I am like such a detective. I'm sniffing around every corner inside of a script, looking for the clues. And then you get into rehearsal and maybe it doesn't work for you. Maybe what you were going for just doesn't do it for you. You know what I mean? You just have to keep going back to the text. I want to leave a little bit of time for you guys to ask me questions, but I did print up, you know what, I think I'll email it to Kelly to email you guys some quotes about the theater that I think will be fun to have right now. The theater is a spiritual and social x-ray of our time. The theater was created to tell people the truth about life and their social situation. Life beats down and crushes the soul, and art reminds you that you have one. So these are things, the actor cannot afford to look only to his own life for all his material, nor pull strictly from his own experience to find his choices and feelings. So these are just quotes. I have quotes up. I love quotes. My daughter hates quotes. She just hates them. I took all of her paintings once. I put quotes under them, put them in a little book for the family once. And she went, "Mom." I said, "What?" And she went, "I don't like it." And I went, "Why?" And she went, "I hate inspiration. I'm not like you." I went, okay. You know, and that's having a teenager. I hate inspiration. I happen to love inspiration. I love inspiration. So anyway, I want you guys to ask me anything. There were a few questions that Kelly had in advance, but I forgot what they are. So whoever has them,
well, we
shoot
can
them
open
out.
it up. Who has a question? What has popped up from this fabulous lesson?
Great.
I'm new to Stella Adler, and
Yes.
you make her sound so unbelievably wonderful. What do you recommend starting with?
Okay, so first of all, because of the time we live in, it's just really fun. There are a few YouTube videos of Stella actually teaching that are so thrilling. Her book on script analysis is called Stella Adler, American Masters, and she goes through Chekhov and O'Neill and Williams and Miller and all of these great playwrights. If you Google her and read about her, she was a great, great actress. She came from an acting family, and she personally worked with Stanislavski. She was one of his favorite students. She then became, a star teacher, and of all her classes, her script interpretation class was just a mind blower. And it's to this day, it is, it's every time I get a script or write a script, it's also very useful when you're writing to try and think in these terms. She has written 4 books, I think. Uta Hagen's book, which is kind of like the Bible, I studied with both of them at the same time. And this is the way I described it. Uta was like the nuts and bolts, like the ballet bar. Every day, Uta's theory was, you can't teach talent. These are the tools that you will use if you have talent to get to what it is you're supposed to be doing. Stella was all about size. She said to us one day in class, the reason why was Marlon Brando, who was her student, a great actor? She said, because he didn't play the Godfather like an Italian gangster, he played him like a fallen Caesar. And that was all, no matter what we were working on, she would say, you have to find the size in the material to make it important to the audience that you're giving it over to. So she was the inspiration, and Uta for me was the toolkit. So those were the difference between those two teachers. There's tons of books that she's written, and when you see her teach, you will get it. I mean, she was scary as hell, but really, this class was the one that just, you know, I carried with me forever and ever and ever. And, you know, with each play and each script, you know, boy, that worked great last time. It doesn't work at all this time, or with each director. But I do feel like the thing we do have control over is our relationship to the script, and spend some time on that. I find most people do not. On many sets that I get to, they know the plot, they know what happens, but they didn't spend time on it. And that's why I thought, maybe if we do script interpretation, this is something we can all spend time on now when we can't spend time with each other. You know, for those of you who are writers, to take a script, you know, by a great writer and do this with it will definitely help your writing. It certainly has mine. Who has another question?
Ashley wrote in, and she saw the opening scene at the Uta Hagen 100th celebration of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and you made an amazing Martha. Have you performed the full play? If not, she hopes you get to do it real soon.
Oh, I have not. And that was Austin Pendleton directing me. When Uta Hagen turned 100 years old, which was last year, Lincoln Center in their library has taken all of her papers, all of her books, all of her notes. They've archived them, and they're available at the Lincoln Center Performing Arts Library for anybody who wants to see them. Her movies, all of this kind of stuff. So I think it was Ethan Hawke and me and some other students of hers who we were not off book or anything. We just had scripts, and Austin Pendleton was directing us the way that Uta would have. And no, I would very much like to do that part someday. I feel like there's so much in it to be explored. So keep your fingers crossed, whoever asked that question, or yeah, let's hope so. Yes.
Can I ask a quick one, Kelly?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, sure.
So this kind of goes off of one of your last responses. You know, a lot of times being an actor can feel like being in a washing machine. When you feel like you've contributed something great, you know, your friend will get the role or what have you. What's kind of a winning attitude that you've sustained personally within so many projects throughout your career? Just knowing that sometimes someone will like it, sometimes someone won't like it. You know how that goes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a great question. And it, you know, when I was getting ready for this class with you guys, I was thinking about, I was like looking at some of these YouTube videos and stuff like that. And, you know, you're basically saying, how do you endure? It's really about endurance, you know, and it's really, really, really hard. I think you go back to the source, meaning, you know, the thing about acting is that makes it trickier than almost anything else is, quote unquote. How many times have you heard this from relatives and stuff? I could have been an actor. You know, people think that you can just show up and be an actor. It's an art form, but it is not recognized as an art form. And I understand that. When I was teaching college, when I was living in Los Angeles, I left for several classes to shoot 21 Jump Street. And I came back and I went to the dean and I went, okay, you have to fire me. And he said, why? And I said, because these kids don't need to know any of this. Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum are movie stars. That's what they want to be. And they've never taken an acting class in their life. So why do they need to know all this stuff? They don't. And it makes me feel so guilty. I mean, there's no way to tell anybody how to be a movie star. I don't know how to do that. But I think the thing that's so thrilling and exciting and underrepresented in this art form is it's the subject of everything for every part you do. It's like we were talking about today. Okay, now I can take and look, we live in the We live in the age of Google. You don't even have to put any skin in the game. You just have to Google small New England colleges and spend a day reading about what those environments are like. And now all of a sudden, something that I would never have been necessarily interested in, now I've started to study a little bit. And that's what I think is so thrilling. I think, you know, I'm good at it sometimes, other times I'm bad at it. You just have to make a pact with yourself that you're going to allow yourself to be depressed. You're going to allow yourself to be unsure and unsteady and self-doubting and all of those things that are going to happen, but you are not going to quit. That's the only promise you have to make to yourself. And no matter how big and like these feelings are sitting on top of me like a boulder. And believe me, so many people have said to me, when are you going to quit in one way or another? Because they're worried about you. You're going to make a living, you have children, how are you going to support them? What are you doing? I mean, you know, it's just goes with the territory, but I made a deal with myself that I wasn't going to quit. And I will share with you, and it's certainly something good to know during this time. When I first came to New York, I was in something called a showcase. They don't do them anymore. They were so wonderful, but they were like, if you live in Los Angeles, like Waiver Theater, you didn't get paid. They did great plays, 100-seat theaters, and they were showcases so that people in the industry, agents and producers, could come see new talent. And I did this play called Rain, and I got a call from the head of casting of CBS. I'd been in New York, you know, a hot minute, and I thought, this show business stuff, I have this licked. This is really easy. I'm going in to see the casting, head of casting, a major television network. So I get into the room, and he said, I have nothing for you. That was his opening line. I was like, uh-oh. Things are not going the way I thought they were going. He said, but I think you're really talented. And I know you're new to New York. And I want to give you some advice. He said, you need to learn to wait creatively. That was such a gift. And look at what we're doing, you guys. We're in a pandemic. I mean, I would say that Kelly and her team have made waiting creatively so much easier, have been an inspiration for all of us. But I think that's the best thing that I can tell you is you should write, you should knit, you should draw, you should learn opera, you should wait creatively. And every time you feel that, you know, that somebody's broken your heart, which they will over and over and over again, find something creative to be the antidote to it. You know, that's what you're going to do when you get that bee sting. And that's my advice is to be proactive on your own behalf. I can't do that, but I try sometimes. And don't let anybody else define you. That's so much easier said than done. I hate those platitudes, but I try and live them and fail at them and try and live them and fail at them. You know how that is. Who else has a question? Anybody?
Max wrote in and he was wondering, what are the clues that indicate where the beat changes? He also wrote that he finds difficulty finding these and feels like he breaks down scenes into beats that are too brief, too small. I have the same issue, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
I think it's when you think the action changes. Again, it doesn't, you know, there's no right or wrong on this. It's like, okay, let's just take a very simple example. If I want something and let's say I want you to open the door for me because I've got packages and I say, open the door. Could you open the door? Would you please open the door? And you don't open the door, right? Now, I've still got my packages. I don't have the door open. Do I keep yelling, open the door, open the door? No, I just instinctually change strategy, right? So my strategy might be to walk over the door and put my foot on the inside of it. My strategy might be to pretend like I'm crying. My strategy might be to scare you. You know what I mean? And when you look at a script, yes, there are little mini beats inside of beats, but when do you think the action changes? In the example of Virginia Woolf, right? I felt, and again, you can disagree with this, I felt the beat changed when Martha said she's discontent. It felt like something had come to a mini conclusion. And she says afterwards, well, what's the name of that picture? And George says, I really don't know. To me, it felt like whatever was going on in the trying to remember what's the name of the Betty Davis movie, whatever Martha was doing, whatever George was doing, they are now picking up new tactics with each other. And George, instead of trying to play the game, goes, I'm tired, it's late. So now he's picking a new tactic, as I can see it. And Martha is off and running. What do you have to be tired about? You don't do any fucking thing, right? So now we're into a new beat. And I think it has to do with what can you play? If you make the beats too small, you'll feel like you're insane if you're playing different things, right? You know, I'm tormenting you, I'm seducing you, I'm ignoring you. Well, if you are playing those actions and you only have 2 lines to play each one, you'll start to feel like, oh my God, I'm going to explode. So that's another way to look at it, is when you look at the beginning and let's just say we decided that Martha's opening action or opening objective is to punish George, right? In one way or another. So you can't punish him for 25 minutes without a good outcome. Nobody would do that. That'd be insane, right? But you punish him to a certain point, and then what's the next thing you do? So Martha may be punishing him indirectly in the first beat, and then she is going to criticize him in the second beat. She doesn't criticize him openly in the first beat as she does in the second beat. So think about your own instrument and what you're playing, and when you feel it runs out of gas in terms of the script, or when you feel your body goes, I need to try something else. In the same way that if you were just starting a rehearsal, you might say to the director, can I get up here? I feel like I need to get up. What are you feeling there? You might be feeling the beat has changed. So, and I'm telling you, the more you do this, the better your instincts will be for it. I mean, there's no textbook out there that goes, you got that wrong. That beat does, it's just up to you. It's a way to give yourself train tracks to ride your performance on. That's all. So you get to construct it any way you want.
Where should we go as actors looking to write to grow? And
2 things I would say. I take classes, and that, because accountability is really important to me, like at primary stages, which has a great, I mean, I would say being in a class has 2 really big values. One is just plain learning about the structure. And you know so much more about writing a play from being an actor than you even know that you know. And also building community of writers who listen to your work and give you advice about what's happening. You know, writing teachers say the same thing that acting teachers do. It's very interesting. Writing teachers will say when they evaluate your work, what does the character want? And what is their obstacle? That is exactly what acting teachers say to you. What do you want? What is your obstacle? They're the exact same problems to solve. You're just using a different instrument in a way. And, you know, I think I'm so excited for the next generation where, you know, creativity is not partitioned off into, I'm a director, I'm a writer, I'm an actor, I'm a producer. We're all of those things. We really are. And now technology in the world has made it possible for there to be, you know, a way to distribute, to create that kind of distribution system. Jordan, you had a question, right? Your hand was up. I saw Jordan's hand.
I think so. I think I wrote this in, but I'll ask you now. I guess, what would you call your favorite failure in life? I mean, is there something that was a turning point that maybe
I wouldn't call it a favorite. I wouldn't call it a favorite.
No, favorite. No, but, that's the one in quotes.
I got fired from a Broadway show, and it was really traumatic. I mean, it was so traumatic. I just can't even tell you. And this is the worst part. I was living in LA, and all my friends gave me a big going away party because I had to sign a year's contract. I got fired during rehearsals, and then I thought, I can't go back. They gave me a party. Where am I going to go? I'm going to have to be in hiding till it's over. You know what I mean? And I was, you know, I think I was scapegoated and not fairly fired. And that was sort of the press on it, was that it was scapegoating, not fairly fired. And the play was a big bomb, which was really satisfying. But it was also an answer to your question about how do you keep going? I thought I would never work in the New York theater again. I was living in LA at the time, And so every time I got summoned back to New York to do something, it was like, yay, they haven't forgotten about me, you know. And then I get fired and I go, oh, uh-oh, this is it. It was like being excommunicated from the theater, the thing that I love more than anything. And that didn't end up being true. The next season, I came into New York and I was asked to do a play at Lincoln Center. So it literally felt like the end of the world to not keep it so mysterious. It was a play called The Ritz. It was being done at Studio 54. It was written by Terrence McNally, and I was fired by Joe Mantella. So just so you know, yeah, it was bad. So I would say that was my biggest failure. And
so
then
your comeback felt so good.
Well, then I was doing a play 2 years later on Broadway, and Joe Mantella came backstage, and he said, "I can't remember why I fired you. You were so great in this." You know, and believe me, it was like somebody cut off a limb. But I had an agent, my very first agent said, until you get fired, you're not in show business. So keep that in mind. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, I've worked with Woody Allen a lot. Woody Allen replaces people all the time. And it's not a judgment on their work. It's that he's invited you into his imagination. And somehow your picture doesn't line up with his picture, but he has no idea how incredibly brutal that is. His casting director of many years told me that he was shooting a scene in a nursing home. They were all extras, but he pulled a few people out to have lines. And then he replaced them when he reshot the scene. And Juliet said the hardest part of her job ever was having to tell these people who were in their 90s, who were living in a nursing home, who'd called every relative that they had, "You're going to see me in Woody Allen's new movie." No, they're not. You know, so I think, yeah, that was a big one, Jordan. That was a pretty big one. That was one that came to me from the outside. From the inside, where you go, what are my biggest failures? I'm sure this has happened to you guys before, where you'll wake up 6 months after you're in a play and you'll go, "Oh my God, that's what it was about." You know, where I didn't know. And you get it, like the light bulb comes way too late. It turns on late, and the whole time you're in it. I did Moon for the Misbegotten when I was really young, and I thought, oh, I was so great. I was so not great. And then I saw Colleen Dewhurst, the great Colleen Dewhurst, do it, and I went, I didn't understand that play at all. Not at all. I didn't know what that play was about at all. And I just kept trying to cover that needling self-doubt that happens when you're doing something, but you just have to get out there and do it. And then I saw it done right, and I went, oh, I didn't know what I was doing. I failed. I definitely failed at that. And, you know, even though it's really hard to do, you have to take those moments and, you know, hope for them to be a teaching moment. You know, you really have to get rid of the judge. Just get rid of the judge. If you can kill off your personal judge, it will go a really long way towards your future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other last minute questions? I have one question to leave us off on. Megan.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Megan.
I love the idea of waiting creatively, and I have 2 young children, so I feel like I've been on hiatus for a few years now, and I keep waiting to get back to my previous life of like regional theater and all sorts of fun things. So you mentioned you had a daughter, and I don't know, you know, when in your life you had her or any other children, but I'm just wondering, like, how do you navigate, or how did you navigate having children and doing this very consuming career? Because I'm finding that right now I am waiting, and I'm trying to do writing in order to do something creative while I'm home with the kids.
That's great.
Which has been wonderful, but I'm just still like yearning to go out when the pandemic is over, of course, and like do theater again professionally, because that's where part of my heart is, you know. So how did you do that?
I have 2 children. They're now grown. I kept not wanting to get pregnant. My husband wanted to be a parent many years before me. And I got cast in a Neil Simon play on Broadway. And after I auditioned the first time, I said to him, if I get this, we'll have a burn the diaphragm party, because even if it got bad reviews, I knew it would run for a year. And I felt exactly the way you did, which was, oh my God, I'm about to kiss my life goodbye. And I just have to do one more thing to kind of cement myself into the consciousness of this community. And Mike decided not to do the play and the production was canceled. And I was pregnant. And I was like, oh my God. Everybody else called their agents when they found out for a new job. I called my gynecologist for a new diaphragm. But I was already pregnant, and I was pregnant with my son. And the two things I did was I took him with me. I remember when he was very little to Playwrights Horizons to do a reading, and I left them a lot. I did both of those things. I took them with me and I left them behind. And that's just the reality of what you're going to have to do. And that's very personal. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I think what you're doing is great, which is writing. Just make sure, I would say the one thing you don't want to do is completely extricate yourself from the community of theater artists around you, because that's when it gets really scary, where you feel you're not entitled to jump back in. Take classes if you can. You know, it just depends on, you know, how you define that job. I had a wonderful, supportive teammate, so I could leave them, which I did for, you know, large periods of time, you know, I commuted from Berlin while I was making a movie when my daughter was little every 3 weeks. There are people I know that wouldn't leave their children for 3 weeks at a time. You know, that's something that's just got to be something that's okay with you or not okay with you. I will tell you that, and not now, school makes it much easier. Once there is, I don't know how old they are. How old are they now?
4 and almost 7.
Okay, so you don't have, when they're both full-time, all day, every day in school, you're going to start to feel like, you know.
Not this year, but.
Not this year,
no school this year.
But you might have a runway of, let's say, 5 or 6 hours in a row.
Right.
And if you don't feel comfortable, I mean, you know, if you're in a play, you're leaving kids, you know, you're leaving them every night of the week, and you may not feel comfortable doing that, but you certainly can take classes during those 6 hours. And I would urge you to take an acting class once they're in school, even if you don't like it or don't like the teacher or whatever. Just go to the gym. You know what I mean? So that when you do get to jump back in, those muscles are there for you. I think that's the only way.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm going to ask one more question because I'm going to be sending around, as I usually do, everyone will get a follow-up email, but you know, in preparation for today and in my reading about Caroline, I came across a beautiful piece she wrote called The Mother Lode and Mrs. Maisel, which takes readers from the fictional table of the Maisels and Weissman family to her own family's table. And she talks a lot about her mother, who was an amazing activist and advocate. Nina Abadi, is it Abadi?
Yes, exactly right. Nina, because it was Southern. Nina Abadi, yes.
Nina Abadi. And so you're going to get that article and learn so much about her amazing mother. Caroline has worked with the greats, but also her mother was outstanding. And I just want to know from you, Caroline, in this moment, what advice would your mother have wanted to share with the world?
That this is happening to everyone, all over the world, not just to us, not just to you. It's happening to everyone all over the world. And if we can think of this as a moment to figure out what we all have in common, it will have had some merit. That's what I would say my mother would tell me.
Yes.
And with that, thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Kelly, for being remarkable.
Oh,
thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you.
I see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.